All right, we're here with Dave Sheppard from MedWorld Advisors. Welcome back, Dave.
Hi, Adam. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on. So today we're doing an exit prep session, and we're going to talk about negotiation, what to expect in a sell-side transaction, some tips, some tactics. I know you're seen as the negotiations guru in MedWorld Advisors with your clients, and I was speaking with Estelle actually in another exit prep session on diligence, and she mentioned that you'd had a client who maybe had looked at previously going to market, and then they engaged with MedWorld, and you got in there and I think performed pretty well in the negotiations phase and wound up doing a pretty good job of getting a sell price that the seller had never really expected. So I followed up and tracked you down for this session on negotiation tips and tactics. And we've got 20 minutes, so we don't really want to go too deep into this one. We can in other exit prep sessions, but for an intro, what I'd love to cover is just kind of what is the seller's experience in the negotiation process. Really, what should they expect? Who are they typically negotiating with, and how you think about that at MedWorld as you're entering into a transaction, and then really how do you ensure the best outcome? If you have any specific actionable tips for that, would love to hear that from your perspective. So I'm just going to shut up and let you run with it. But if we could start really with what is the seller's experience and who are they negotiating with, and I'll let you roll.
Yeah, Adam, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the chance to talk about negotiation. It's actually one of the favorite things that I do. We enjoy doing a lot of things at MedWorld Advisors, from commercialization to M&A and running the process and finding the targets. But the fun part for me personally, because I've been doing this my whole life, is really the negotiation process. And it's really great when you have an opportunity to think about your initial conversation that you had with a potential client who becomes your seller client, about what their expectations were. And then when you're able to negotiate a deal and you're able to exceed what their expectations are. And we do that at a regular basis at MedWorld Advisors. And so it's exciting when that happens. And we really like it when the seller has an outcome that they feel good about. And how you get there is not only great negotiations, but it's a good process. And we'll save the process for a different conversation. But as far as the negotiation is concerned, it really evolves around setting up the stage for the negotiation to begin with, which I'll just touch on the process a little bit, because part of that is getting to a point to understand in the negotiation, first of all, the what is possible, and what is the leverage that you have in terms of negotiations, right? So in thinking in terms of the what is possible when two parties are coming together, sometimes it's as simple as, this is going to be a buy-sell transaction. I'm going to sell you something. You're going to buy it. It could be a situation where maybe there are assets in that one company that are really going to be good for that buyer, but maybe there's assets that really aren't going to help them, and so maybe there's actually a separate negotiation to spin that off. So it's always helpful to actually understand what's the maximum value between the parties going to be, and then how do you leverage that to be able to create a win-win outcome. And then when you're thinking about actual negotiation between two parties, it is helpful on your seller's behalf, when you're in our role, is to make it a little bit more competitive. And we do that through a good process, so that it's not just one potential buyer. It's not just two, maybe it's three, it's four, maybe it's five, depending upon the type of seller that it is that you would have interested in it, and being able to set the stage for negotiation with each one of those buyers. Maybe I'll pause there just for a second to allow you to interject something before I would move on.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, if we can, so again, we're gearing this towards the first-time seller. So if they're coming in and hopefully engaging with the MedWorld, if they're in the healthcare niche or doing it on their own, if they're looking at this exit prep session for guidance, are there top negotiation points that frequently come up in a sell-side transaction? So are you engaging with a quality of earnings professional because you know that the cash flow number is going to be something that is combed through over and over again, and you need to be able to defend that position? Are you doing something like for MedWorld, if you have a client in your process, and again, we can save the process for another exit prep session, but are you looking at this for each client in terms of, I don't know, are you doing a SWOT, right? I mean, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, opportunities, threats? And then are you thinking about this for each buyer in terms of what they're likely to look at? It's, again, trying to keep it relevant within 20 minutes might be a bit of a challenge, but if there are top items like cash flow or, you know, the most commonly contested items in a sell side transaction that are worth talking about in this time chunk, that would be great.
Yeah, I understand, because we could definitely go several hours on each one of those particular topics, and probably be a very valuable experience in doing so. But really getting back into the negotiation on behalf of the seller, I think what the seller has to think about is that, first of all, the process of negotiation itself. So the seller wants to think about how they're going to engage somebody like ourselves, whether it's MedWorld or another advisor, or if they're not going to invade it, if they're going to try to go it on their own. We would highly advise, if they don't pick us, that they would pick somebody else that was competent, because they typically will do a little better if they're not personally involved. It's an individual choice, of course, but that's the starting point. Because just a little tip of why that's important, beyond, experts like us think that we can do a little better for our clients, and sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not true. I think more often than not it is. However, one of the things that gets challenging sometimes when you get a negotiation is if it's your business, and you're negotiating, and Adam, you're offering me $10 million for my business, and I think it's worth $12 million, and you just keep saying, well, Dave, okay, well, maybe I'll give you 10 million and a penny, right? Now I'm offended, right?
Yeah.
And if you start to get emotions involved in negotiations, and really the emotional quotient gets in the way, negotiation, it's a little more challenging for that to be a successful negotiation. So you have to find a way to be able to make sure that you keep it really at the business level, and keep those kind of passions to the side. And so you don't want anybody to get offended on either side. And that's where a good independent advisor can really be helpful, because you can tell me, Adam, on behalf as a buyer, you're going to pay my seller 10 million and a penny, and I'm going to say, well, thank you for your offer. I mean, we're always polite, we're always professional with each other. However, I just don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work for my client. And so how did you? So now I'll start asking questions. Say, how do you get there? Let's have a conversation. Good negotiations are not yelling matches. They're not screaming matches, right? They're actually good discussions as far as, okay, so when you're thinking about this business being worth 10 million and a penny, how is that adding up for you? Where did you get there? Our client is thinking that we're worth 12 million, 13 million, whatever we think we might be in this situation. And so we have a gap here. So how do we help you figure out that gap so we can get the seller where he needs to be, and you can get into this business that obviously that you have an interest in. And you can, if you're the only buyer in the situation, I'm probably not going to let you know that, but I might treat the situation a little bit different than if I've got you, and then I've got say Lynn on your team as another buyer coming in. I might challenge you a little bit more, a little faster about the total valuation. But if you're the only one in the equation, I'll probably be a little slower in terms of how I push you, trying to understand it is where you're at and why you think you need to be there to make this a successful deal for yourself, and then try to help you understand why the seller thinks they need to be at a certain place for this to be a successful deal. And then from there, then you have to start thinking about, if you get to an impasse, okay, what are the next steps? Do we start thinking about possible compromises? Do we start thinking about things like earnouts, loans, those types of things, if you're the only buyer in the equation? But what I would really advise a seller to do is, if they're trying to do that on their own, is not go too quickly to try to change that paradigm with one of those options. I'd really try to seek to understand where the buyer is at. Obviously, if they're talking to you, it's a great thing, because they obviously have other places to spend their time. It means they have an interest in your business. So then what you want to figure out is, okay, why are they interested? What's the value they're getting? And maybe they just haven't got the whole picture yet. So maybe I can just help them understand the total value and get there. And then at that point, if you're at impasse and you want to start to think about other ways to move forward. And I'll pause there, Adam, just for a second.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. I think trying to break some of that out. I think one interesting point you really made there was basically having the broker in the middle to kind of remove the ego risk, right? Where, I mean, especially with a seller, if they've been building something maybe for a lifetime, you're gonna have a lot of buyers who are direct about why your business isn't worth what it's worth, and that's their job. And so having a broker in the middle, I think, could probably help save a lot of deals that would otherwise submarine pretty quickly. Again, you guys are niche, so knowing those buyers would be interested in a deal, it allows you to go and approach them in a coordinated fashion, right, within a certain time frame, to drum up interest and play them off of each other to a degree, right? So I'd love to hear about how you do that with whatever you're comfortable sharing. I mean, if you have one potential buyer, you mentioned you're not going to let you're not going to let them know. Obviously, that's your job, is to represent the seller. But if you have multiple buyers, maybe one is okay with the 12 million, but their terms suck, and then maybe somebody has really great terms, but their price is a little lower. Are you trying to play the buyers off of each other, where you might try to have that person who is low on cash better their terms, or if you have somebody who has really a higher price but restrictive terms, you get what I'm saying. We're in terms of playing between the buyers and the terms, and you're playing them off of each other.
Yeah, as a starting point, Adam, I'd like to back up just for a second, so that the sellers really understand clearly what we are trying to do at a point in time. Is what we are actually trying to do is maximize the value that particular seller has in the marketplace, in the current market dynamics of the day. So if that's June 2021 and you're selling today, whatever's available today, we want to get that for you today. If it was last year, we wanted to make sure we got the best for you last year. Next year, it's the same thing. And because those valuations may change, the available buyers may change, a lot of dynamics that may change. So what's ever available for you in the market today, that's our ultimate goal in the process, is to get that for you through our efforts. And it starts actually at the beginning, because at the beginning we have to think about the things that you just talked about, is what type of buyers do we want to have in the process? Do we want to have private equity buyers, when individual buyers? We want to have strategic buyers. Obviously, we're going to think about all those, and if we think it makes sense, we're going to reach out to anybody that we could see value in the opportunity for our seller, so that we can expand the market opportunity and the market value opportunity for that particular seller. So as we get to that point where we've now done that, we've reached out, we found the ones of those that would be interested, and we are trying to create value every step of the way. So when we're having these negotiations, now that they've had some interest and they're thinking about an LOI, or maybe they've thrown down a term sheet, now we've hopefully set the stage for it, because we've actually along the way showed them why this would be interesting, why this is a great fit, and what were the different value points. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we didn't miss any of the value points, because that really can be something that could lose our seller some valuation. So we want to make sure that with each buyer, regardless if there's one in the process or 10, that each one of them understands the opportunity that they have for them and what's it going to build for them. Like, if this is a private equity company, is this going to be something they're going to build as a foundation, or is this something that's going to be a bolt-on because they have something else, and maybe they can even make some synergies and make things grow farther? If it's a strategic, where does this fit in their portfolio, and how are they going to be able to grow in the marketplace and hold off competitors and gain market share? Maybe there's some innovation there they can take not only from what the seller has, but maybe put into their own products as well. So that's kind of where we're starting from. So then when we get into those discussions on behalf of the seller, our job is now to start bringing those values to the seller and say, okay, buyer X is thinking this way, and here's where they're coming from. Buyer Y is thinking this. Buyer Z is here, and they might all be at different places. And then you have to think about the seller dynamics of where they're at, and is it a seller, founder, owner, one person making the decision? Is there a lot of investors, and there's going to be a big board of directors, and they're making the decisions? So you have to think about that, how they're going to make a decision on behalf of all the stakeholders in the company. And the key thing is for them to understand at a given point in time, based upon today's dynamics, buyer X is here, Y is here, Z is here, and how is this feeling for you, for where the company needs to be to be able to satisfy the stakeholders? And then it's really a collaboration with the seller, because we're we're not trying to dictate to any seller what they should get for it. We're just trying to tell them what's available in the marketplace. And then, if they say, okay, yeah, buyer X seems pretty good for this reason or Y, because maybe buyer X is going to keep my legacy out. They're not going to go fire a whole bunch of people afterwards and all that. And then maybe X and Y are similar. Maybe I might want to negotiate more with X than Y because I like the legacy where that's going to go. So hey Dave, go back and see if you can get a little bit more out of X, so that it just makes it easier for me to say yes to buyer X than to buyer Y, because it is, at the end of the day, when there's money on the table, it's hard to walk away from money table, even if it's not your ideal scenario for your future employees and that sort of thing. So then we'll work with the seller collaboratively to say, okay, let's go back to X and okay, Y is here and Z is here, and maybe we can get to here with buyer X, and then we get you the ultimate situation you want. And then let's just go make a deal if we get you to where you need to be, and let's not let the ones that aren't going to be fit your ideal scenario, because part of making a good transaction for a seller is getting them the best value, and it's also getting them the best outcome that they feel good about. Some of these sellers have been in their communities for years. They want to be able to walk around their community afterwards and know that Joe and Mary that worked for them are still doing good in the new situation, that sort of thing. So I'll pause there for a minute, but that will give you some idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a really interesting point about knowing the different types of buyers and how they want different things. And then you are emphasizing those things that they're focused on to drive the valuation, to maximize the price. Again, I think that's something where only an intermediary who's really placed in the center of that transaction is going to be in a position to do that effectively. We didn't really touch on who are you negotiating with? Like, obviously buyer, seller, but who's at the table? I mean, typically who do you wind up communicating with throughout the process?
Yeah, and one thing that I'll mention around that, as I get to your question, is one thing that's helpful is the fact that because we are industry focused in healthcare and med tech and all that, we understand the market, so we understand the value points in the market. So when we are discussing to people, it's easier for us because to talk to a buyer about hey, you're trying to discount this particular thing as a value for this company. You can't BS us because we know the industry. So you'll get that's a nice conversation to have. But it's not. But now if we were selling a restaurant last week and we're going to go sell some gas stations next week, that might be different. But since we're focused, we understand those points. So getting to your question,
and just to reiterate, that's because you have buyers coming to you all the time looking for specific types of deals, so you know what they're looking for and you know what's of interest and what's not in your specific space.
Yeah, it's really the two core buyers in our industry for the types of deals that we do are the private equity buyers, and then also strategics. A lot of us come out of the strategics. We have relationships with strategics. We've been on the other side of the table, so we know how they negotiate. We know how they think. They actually tell us. They look for meetings with us each other. They want to know what we have, because they understand that because we know what their process is. We know how to put things together so it fits their value proposition and the models that they have to go through. And same thing on the private equity side. They, for the most part, there's some variations in them. They have a similar model as far as how they go about things. So we understand their process, and we want to help them be successful too. So the part of a good successful outcome is not only make sure we maximize the value for our seller, but we want a good outcome for the buyer because we want them to win and then be able to move forward. And that's how the market continues to grow. So typically, who we're negotiating with is on the buyer side, if it's a private equity firm, we might be negotiating, with one of the managing partners of the private equity firm. It might start lower level than that, and then as it gets elevated, you might get to there, or it might just start there. Every firm does that a little bit differently. On the strategic side, you're typically negotiating with an M&A person. They call them BD&L executives, business development and licensing. Sometimes they're called corporate development. Somebody in that kind of title, like just as an example, Stryker has, I think, 24 different business divisions, and I think they have more than 20 separate M&A professionals because they like to have a person tied to the business unit to be able to help them with M&A for each of those particular units. So when you say, hey, are you going to go talk to the M&A person at Stryker? Well, okay, yes, but that might be 1 to 20 something people.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing at at Medtronic and a few of the other companies. So that's typically who is on the other side of the table is an M&A professional like ourselves that the strategic side, they kind of know they've gone and got a pre-approval. They know the range that they can do on this deal. They're not usually going to give that to you on their first term sheet, but they know where they can go. So you're negotiating with that person and you're trying to find out, okay, how do we get all that out of them, not leaving anything on the table? And so it's still a win for them because they've already got this approved. And then on the other side, on the private equity side, depending upon the size of the PE firm, they might have a little bit more flexibility because if that managing partner is directly involved with the investment committee and that group, he or she might be able to push it a little farther because they can have influence there. If it's a bigger group, they may not be able to push it as far because they have to get more people involved. So you have to understand the landscape of who you're working with. That is for sure.
Yeah, and then for you as an intermediary, when you're getting the engagement and actually meeting with the seller I'd imagine you're trying to set a walk away price, and how much involvement would you have post sale, post transaction, all these terms that are going to come up in the transaction. You're discussing these with the seller. Does that wind up being kind of a family negotiation? Are you sitting down with the spouse? Is there
every situation is a little bit different. Sometimes it's a founder, sometimes it's a family, sometimes it's a board of directors, right? What's the board expectations for the stakeholders? And what I'll tell you is that I know some M&A advisors do, but we don't. We actually will never guarantee an outcome when we start, because at the end of the day, the market will tell you what your value is worth. What we can assure a seller of is that our process is going to get us in front of the right people. We're going to be talking to the right people, and we can, because of our industry knowledge, we can create the right value proposition together with our seller to make sure that those buyers understand the value, and then the value to each buyer is going to be unique. And so we might find out it's worth 15 million to buyer X and 25 million to buyer Z. Just because of different things and of where they're at. So we do like to know expectations from a seller, where they would like to be, and we definitely strive very hard to get there. And as I said earlier in this conversation, we feel good about when we exceed those, and we usually do. But we never guarantee anything, because at the end of the day, if anybody tells you anything other than the marketplace decides what your value is, they either are lying to you or they're inexperienced.
Yeah. Okay. Look, Dave, I think that was a great overview. Maybe we could do a couple more sessions just niching down a bit on some of these topics, but for session one with the negotiations one-on-one, I think this was great.
Adam, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to the next opportunity to discuss negotiation with you. You can tell I enjoyed this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we love having you on. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, Dave.